Well, hello, everyone. I cannot tell you how excited I am to have Imara Jones and Randi Weingarten together in conversation for the very first time. Imara Jones, who is a MSNBC contributor, the founder of Translash Media, as well as the host of the Anti-Hate Trans Machine podcast. And Randi Weingarten, who is the president of AFT and the author of a very recently out book. You have your book right there, Why Fascists Fear Teachers. Welcome.
What a double entendre.
Well, it's interesting to me because I feel like fascists equally hate teachers and trans people, it seems.
Yeah. I would say they hate trans people more.
Yeah. So
Imara, do you agree?
Yeah, well, first off, I'm on MSNBC a lot. I'm not technically an MSNBC contributor. I'm sure somebody would call me if I didn't say that.
You should be. I'm now speaking that into existence. MSNBC, she should be a contributor. There we go.
We're open to it, but it's not something that's happened. So I don't want to get a phone call saying I misrepresented myself. The other thing is, I think they have a lot of people that they don't like, and that a lot of people that draw their antipathy. They've got a long list. It's one of the things that makes fascist, is that they've got a long list of enemies. I think one of the things that I'm really interested in and that we explore in this latest season of Anti-Trans Hate Machine, which is our investigative series podcast that we put out on an annual basis, is the subtitle this year, which is The Destruction of Public Education, specifically how they're weaponizing anti-trans politics in order to destroy public education. And I have to say that when we first started out in the series, I thought that they wanted to just use anti-trans politics to elect different people so that they could control public education. But one of the things that they said to me, such as people who were close to General Michael Flynn and local Moms for Liberty representatives in Sarasota, Florida, is that their ultimate goal is to actually take the public school system apart, because the authoritarian, the fascistic project can't be complete unless you dismantle the 13,000 school boards across the country, because, as Randi knows, it's the most common democratic touch point that we still have.
Right.
Like 90%.
Exactly right.
There are people who will go to a public school meeting or to a school board meeting that will never vote. And so if you want to capture the country, you got to destroy the public school system.
Well, and Randi, you brought up a very good point in your book, is that the fascist playbook is a shell game of fear, which in the fear of the other. Can you talk about what you mean by that?
Well, let me build on what Imara just said, which is they are using, I've been in this probably 40 years. I think public education, we have to strengthen, not abandon public education. I don't think that, the two choices of either the cruelty of Trump or a broken status quo are choices that, people want for our society. And, so we always have to think about how we envision and how we reimagine, even even institutions like public education, which Imara is right, it is more of a common touch point for. Can you hear me now or not?
Yes.
Sorry, something just happened with my buds, and so I'm just I'm going buttless right now. Sorry.
Okay.
What I was saying is that there's Imara's quite right, that it's not that they want to control. They do actually want to deconstruct and destroy, and they want to deconstruct and destroy because public education is pretty much the only institution that is proactively positive, even with all of our weaknesses, for people and for children and young people in America. Every single state has committed to having it. The territories committed to having it. The founding fathers believed it was really important. So it is really that kind of touch point, and it's so important, not only as a touch point for the habits of democracy, but for opportunity for young people. It's also really, really important. And this is how I get to your question, Maya. It's also really, really important because it's the only place in America, other than at work, where kids who are different actually are in the same classroom, and where instead of trying to exacerbate the differences between difference, it actually is a way of trying to say we should honor differences, and we should not only accept it, but we should celebrate them. And so it is completely antithetical to the fascist project, which is to create either fear or apathy, fear about differences, apathy about who's, in charge. And then because you're so fearful about differences, you create isolationism. So to what we've seen is they've actually given us evidence about what they want to do. I mean, people like the conservative activist Christopher Rufo, who Imara knows quite well, he's told us that, and he's one of the architects of Project 2025 and other things. They've told us that in order to create universal vouchers, essentially a fraction, deconstructing the entire school systems by defunding it, you have to create universal public school distrust. And they will do it by being ruthless or brutal. So, they throw spaghetti up on the wall. And so first was CRT. Not that anybody knows what CRT means, other than maybe, people who teach it or who have actually taken a lesson in it in law school. It's about disproportionate discriminatory impact. But then what they got to in terms of trans kids was, there's kids who are, who are see, here's my dog. And then they'll say, nobody knows what this means. Nobody, what does it mean to not be to be fluid in sexuality? That is something really scary. So all of a sudden, instead of embracing trans kids as as part of all of the fabric of all of God's children, instead it becomes, let's demonize, let's otherize, let's make this really scary, to the point that ads from the last election that would suggest that a kid would come in as identify as a girl in the morning and then identify as a boy in the afternoon, and suggest that the school did that, when schools can't even give kids aspirin without asking their parents. So all of a sudden, this has become the point of saying, schools are really scary. So instead of humanizing our children, instead of saying, how do we actually look at, make that kid who identifies as trans or non-binary, instead of making that kid feel welcome in school, we're going to weaponize that kid. And by so doing, trying to say, see, the school system, because they don't weaponize that kid, we should take our kids out of the school system. What's the difference between that and what happened right after Brown versus Board of Education in the 1950s in Virginia, where, after we won that case, look, we were an amicus brief to that case, the AFT. So I can say, after we won that case, what then happened in Virginia? Segregation academies. No, we're not going to school with Black kids. No. So you see, this is this generation's way of trying to deconstruct and undermine what is supposed to be pluralism.
So,
sorry for my long answer.
No, it's thorough and helpful. And Imara, when you're hearing that, and I know you've been in conversation with families as a part of the podcast, is it starting to resonate with people that this is about the destruction of school for everyone, not just for trans kids, that this is going to potentially affect all children? And so that therefore parents should have a vested interest in fighting for trans rights for trans kids?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to me that the people on the ground get it. And Randy probably knows this, but I mean, I was really shocked in traveling the country, the number of people, community members, parents, concerned citizens who saw the way that this was being used to attack public schools and who themselves mobilized, learned about who was behind these attacks, learned about the Proud Boys, learned about Moms for Liberty, learned about the various parts of the Family Research Council and the local policy councils across the country that are sponsoring these attacks, and have found a way when communities come together to successfully push back against them, because they do realize that these attacks are not only impacting trans people. I mean, one person that I know who ran for school board successfully in Sarasota said that the day that she had to sign notes that her kid could be called the nickname that she's been known by her entire life, or to be signing to allow her to read certain books, that she got how this was not about trans kids and how this was impacting everyone. And I think to Randy's point about segregation, it's really important because, the Christian nationalists and authoritarian movements understand that this is their best chance since segregation to undermine public schools, and that they've been very skillful in using anti-trans politics to sow distrust in public schools so that they can elect the people who will tear the system apart from the inside out. And all across the country, parents get it. I think what I am continuously astounded by, I think besides Randy and AFT and some others, is the way that when you move, beyond sometimes the state level, how national leaders don't get this. They don't understand it. They don't understand the way that this issue is being successfully mobilized. They don't understand the threat that it poses. They don't understand who's behind it, and they just kind of dismiss it as carnival barking and not as a part of this coordinated, integrative strategy to undermine schools. And that's the missing link here. I think people in local communities get it because they see the impact in their daily lives.
I'm so glad that you said.
I'm sorry, just to build on what Imara just said. Sorry, Maya.
That's okay.
We don't know each other. We love each other, and we're like talking to each other. Sorry.
Exactly. No, it's great.
But just like Imara said, it's like you could see this from 2022 on.
That's
like
right.
In 2022, we saw how Rufo, Moms for Liberty, the Proud Boys, COVID, frankly, it broke all of us. But what we saw was that people really wanted to get back to in-school learning and understood its importance. And so you saw the far right try to create this deconstruction through this distrust. And again, masks, vaccines, trans issues, CRT, racism, and maybe it's because, I was a lesbian in the 1970s. When I was a kid, I was gay, but I was a closeted lesbian, and I watched very carefully how my life has changed by the acceptance of essentially much of that LGB dynamic until you get to T, et cetera, et cetera. And so I've been watching how this is a very different level of fear mongering than even when I was a closeted gay kid. It's not, then it was, okay, I don't get this. This may not be, what I think it's immoral. I don't like it. Now it is the dehumanizing that Imara was talking about. It's different. It's a different kind of argument. It is, I'm going to dehumanize. I'm going to make this so bad, so evil, so fearful that you're going to deconstruct every single bit of institution that is around it. And it's and that's the difference between the fear that happened in just general America versus what happens with fascism and authoritarianism. It goes to not just divide, not just denigrate, but a dehumanizing of the other so that you rip it apart. And that's what we're seeing. And that's how they're using it as a cudgel to then say the institution of public education should be ripped apart.
Mm-hmm. And I'm really glad, Imara, that you said coordinated, sponsored, because I think about the fact that it's almost the private sector, the well-funded private sector attacking the public sector, and I don't know that teachers, like, how do we better prepare teachers and arm teachers to understand that this is a well-funded, coordinated attack? Like, how are they supposed to be able to push back when the public sector is never going to have the kind of resources that the private sector does? There's a lot of money being made in the anti-hate trans machine.
Yeah, I think Randy probably can talk about how to mobilize teachers. I think what I can say to your larger point, though, is that I don't think that very few people understand the scale of this. And on some level, Maya, if it was just about money, it would be easier. It would be easier to do. If this was just a project of ALEC, it would be an easier thing to stop because you could just this is about privatization. But as Randy has pointed out, like, a part of this is ideological. It is personal. It is dehumanizing, intentionally so. And it is why you see it is the only place in 5 years of studying like this broad ranging movement. Public education is the only place where we see every part of the Christian nationalist movement mobilized. Everyone from ALEC to billionaires like Betsy DeVos to paramilitary groups like the Proud Boys to places like Heritage Foundation, the Family Research Council, places like the Goldwater Institute, you name it, a Turning Point. Like, there's a long list. They're all involved in the project to destroy public education. And I do think that there are answers to that, but I do think that it is a parallel thing has to happen on people who care about public education, which is an acceptance of this broad ranging attack, that you basically have every single type of institution that's on the Christian nationalist and authoritarian and even the business community far right, they're all mobilized on public education in a way that they're not on anything else.
And part of that is that that if you think about so I just want to build on what Imara just said, because there are answers that I can give you, Maya, but part of the reason I wrote this book, and I didn't actually label anybody a fascist in writing this book, I described fascistic behavior, and why I said how teachers are the antidote is because I wanted people to recognize that this is intentional. This is an intentional movement to try to deconstruct what we do in public education. And there's two prongs here. It's both the pluralism aspect that we just talked about in terms of bringing kids who are diverse, families who are diverse together in one setting, and where they have to learn how to live with each other, whether they agree or not, and that is the habit of democracy. That is how you create the muscle of democracy. Mm-hmm. And when young kids see the potential of that, as frankly, both parties used to see, regardless of where the differences were, public schools were kind of off limits. That was number one. Number two is critical thinking. Which the founders, I love saying the founding fathers believed in critical thinking because they understood that was the bulwark against kings. When somebody would ask a why, or somebody would be able to discern fact from fiction. So in terms of schooling, and this is where you saw the difference between 22 and then 23 and 24. And frankly, schooling was not a big issue in the election. I mean, the issue about trans kids became a big issue. The issue about public education did not become an issue in terms of the 2024 election. But hear what Imara was saying in terms of how then they toggled it together to destroy public schools. Because you didn't hear anybody talk about public schools during the 2024 election. You know, Kamala Harris came to our convention, talked about her second grade teacher. That was kind of the last time anybody talked about public schooling. But you could create in public schooling a safe and welcoming environment where kids really are engaged in relevant curriculum. And when you saw in 2023 and 2024 that people on a local level came together, they voted in public school candidates and they voted out the people who were who wanted to undermine this. On a local level, you see the community coming together. On a national level, you don't see virtually any of the national leaders on the who are Democrats understanding this threat or understanding what to do about it. You see the ALEC folk, the Betsy DeVos folk, understanding how to try to deconstruct us, but you do not see the Democrats saying why public education is so important and what we need to do about it.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think about the fact that many elected officials are products of public education, but many more prominent ones may not be sending their children to public schools and may not feel like they have the authority to speak in that way. Because I'm trying to think of how we can actually get to the point where they're not just saying, oh, I'm a product of public school, and then that's where the conversation ends. It's like, no, we need to figure out, because right now, when I think about, especially during the pandemic, and I think about my daughter, her friends, they're so perpetually online that if the school is no longer the safe place where educating happens, that's where they're learning from the Andrew Tates of the world. That's where they're exposed. And so suddenly the new school becomes this red-pilled algorithm that's being controlled by very nefarious forces that how do we fight against that? And this is what I fear, that parents don't realize how quickly it's changed. That the authority now is the internet as opposed to the teacher, and obviously, like, they're attacking the teachers directly.
Well, I often say our biggest competitor is not the cell phone, but the screen, because that's part of the reason. One of the actually quite interesting new currents is that a lot of people anywhere on the political ideological spectrum are now into distraction-free schools and understanding what harm to attention, not just the bullying, that these screens have been. And it's been interesting to see how this is one of the only places where big tech is starting to lose. That, that there's now been a real push to have distraction-free schools. But we lost the argument with big tech on Copa and Casa to try to hold them accountable for, this kind of unsafe in everybody's feeds. The social media accounts and AI accounts do. But that is our biggest competition. And when we can get kids to actually be together and to see each other for who they are, that's when you start recreating the habits of democracy. And that's what fascists and authoritarians so fear.
Yeah. And on that particular point, I think it's really important to realize how intent they are on linking these two things. I mean, one of the first things that Trump did when he came to office was to issue an executive order about gender identity in schools, right? Immediately linking those two. Also to explore vouchers in schools, right? Tying together this distrust in public schools around gender identity to promote now a national voucher program, which is being pushed. The other thing is, it's really important, this connection, the rise of big tech and the attempt to destroy public schools. I mean, we see places like Prager University, which is kind of this right-wing disinformation campaign that, postulates itself as educational in nature, but creates essentially propaganda videos about US history and a whole host of things. largely get its start on YouTube. And now, because it's allied to the Trump administration, as Randy knows, in certain places, it's being pushed as a legitimate teaching source, as a legitimate curriculum to be able to supplant knowledge and understanding. And so there is this connection again between the big tech and the destruction of public schools. And we know that big tech has allied itself with the Trump administration and has long been obsessed with how to capture public schools for a variety of reasons. So like this pressure is coming in from so many different places.
And yet, even with all of that, even with all of this, because Imara is right, the level of attacks that we get are huge, and the lack of support is it's no longer surprising to me. It's disappointing. The lack of support from leaders, but even with all of that, 90% of our kids go to either traditional or non-traditional public schools. There is an enduring connection with all the voucher issues and all this other stuff, and the supposed Trump principle here. I said supposed because notice how much they are actually trying to control schools, is that they want to give schools back to the states and localities, which have always controlled schools anyway. But what they have done is they have done literally an erasure of all the progress we have made in the last 60 to 80 years to say that every single child, every single one of God's children should be loved and helped and have equal opportunity. And that is what we, as my public school union, that is what we fight for every day.
Well, and it seems to me like it should be a given that teachers are empowered to protect all of their students, regardless of their identity, of their race, that they should be empowered to do so. And it feels like now teachers who want to protect, who want to empower their students are directly targeted, whether that be by libs of TikTok on, and so their livelihoods, but even their safety is at risk. And so I see coalition building somewhat in, I'm not even going to say coalition building, but from higher ed, they're coming together and saying, in some respects, we're not going to, I think just now Arizona State also turned down the funding from the Trump administration, saying, no, we're not going to.
That's 8 of 9.
Of 9. Okay, so we're almost all the way there. But what's preventing a coalition coming together in K-12, like schools saying, hey?
There are many coalitions in K-12. I mean, we have many coalitions. And just like we now have a bunch of different coalitions in higher ed. But what Imara just said is that what is happening on the other side is an intentional strategy to deconstruct and to undermine. Look, 53, or we had 50 senators, including 3 Republicans, who voted against the voucher part of that big, beautiful, that big, ugly bill. It took J.D. Vance to break that tie. In 2024, vouchers were on the ballot in 3 places, 3 states. We won each one of those things. We've won but as Imara said before, there's 13,000 school districts. We basically do this work locally and statewide. We need some Democratic leaders to actually say they believe in public education, just like we need them to say they believe in the labor movement. But just like working class has basically abandoned the Democratic Party, look, I'm a Democrat. I hope we can get them back. I think what's happened is that these issues, which are really affordability, quality of life, how do I help my kids have a good life? These the political process in the United States, which should be local up, most times becomes the political leaders talk Washington down. And I think what happens is that if a lot of the political leaders could actually see the local leaders who are fighting this and could actually bring us together in a different kind of way, it would be huge because those coalitions are there.
I'm glad that you highlighted that they are there, and we're almost out of time.
I think, Imara, do you agree with me or no on that?
Yeah, I think that they are largely atomized, though, and I think that
I
like,
agree.
and
They
they're
have
all
no money.
right, and they're all reinventing the wheel. They get very little support, and it's literally grassroots. And
Exactly.
they've now started to try to knit themselves together, but I think there's nothing that kind of brings them together in a substantial way. And I know that we're out of time, and we've been talking about this from 10,000 feet, but I think one of the things that filters into this conversation when we're talking about communities and we're talking about teachers, the fight on the ground is really nasty. Not only are people there have death threats, they are yelled at, ostracized. I've gone to school board meetings that look like armed camps because there's so much contention on the ground. Like, these fights are personal, they are house by house, and they are nasty, and they're intentionally so because they want to turn off people from public schools. And we can't lose the fact that this is not kind of an academic or removed debate, that when you go to the ground, that these are very, very intense battles that are for the heart and soul of public education, where teachers are risking their livelihoods all the time. I know teachers who've been fired, teachers who've been targeted, teachers who, one teacher said that she feels like she has to wear a bulletproof vest just for standing up for kids. And those teachers need people across society to have their back.
Exactly. And look, what happened during the Biden administration, when the School Boards Association tried to get some help from the Justice Department and Department of Education on some of these fights, and they got ripped apart from it. When the PTA doesn't get involved in any of this because they have been told it's too political. Mm-hmm. That's what you're seeing, is the kind of extremist forces trying to do what Imara just talked about. So we have lots of grassroots connections with people where we try to be low to the ground. We try to support them in all of these different ways. But we do need our national leaders on the, I would say, on the Democratic side to say, this is a really important public good. And this is something that's really important for our country. Yes, to strengthen public schools, to make them better, to make sure every classroom and campus is welcoming and safe, to make sure that there's engaged curriculum where kids really want to be in school and want to learn and have project-based instruction, but see our kids for who they are, not for their differences, but for the fact that each and every one of our children in the United States public schools are someone we should be loving and someone we should be creating a real opportunity for. And that is what we need our public officials to be helping us fight for. Get the resources and look at and accept and value every single one of our kids.
100%. Thank you so much to the two of you for being in conversation on this. I think you're two of the leading minds on public education, but also on inclusivity, because as you mentioned, Randi, that is what public education should be about. And so I think it's important that I hope that one of our public officials, elected officials, that they can say, hey, I want to be the one to spearhead this. I see many people willing to put their, I think of, Zoran Mamdani, the way that he was able to speak about trans issues in a way that was inclusive and championing it, as opposed to treating trans people like it's the third rail of politics. That's not what America is supposed to be about. And so I'm really hoping that we can have a little bit more courage coming from the political class, because even as we have all of these conversations, as you mentioned, Imara, on the ground, people are suffering and people are being attacked left and right. And this is very real. It's not academic or theoretical at all. So thank you for everything that you're doing, the both of you. And I hope this is the beginning of a lifelong friendship in connection between the two of you, because I think you can do amazing work together. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.